What if everything you believed about love was a lie? On a quiet farm, a young man risked everything to marry the girl he loved. But his father, a powerful farmer, said no. Not because she was poor, but for a reason no one dared to speak. The entire village turned against her. Whispers spread. Secrets grew darker. But there was one man, a silent farmhand, who knew the truth. And when he finally spoke up, it didn't just change their love story, it exposed a secret that would shake the entire farm forever. What was the farmer hiding, and why was he so desperate to stop this marriage? Morning light spread slowly across the wide fields, touching the rows of crops with a soft glow. The farm had been awake long before the sun. Workers moved through the land with quiet focus, carrying tools, feeding animals, and preparing for another long day. At the center of it all stood the farmhouse, strong and unyielding, much like the man who owned it. Harland was known throughout the village as a man of order. His word carried weight, and his rules were rarely questioned. He believed that a man built his life through discipline, and he expected the same from everyone around him, especially his only son. Ethan had grown up under that watchful eye. He worked hard and never refused his duties, yet there was something different about him. Where his father saw only land and labor, Ethan noticed people. He spoke kindly to workers, listened to their stories, and often stayed longer than needed just to help. It was during one of those ordinary days that he first noticed Lily. She had come to the farm to earn a small wage. Her dress was simple and worn, her hands marked by work that had begun too early in her life. She moved quietly, keeping her head low, as if trying not to draw attention. But there was a calm strength in her presence, something that set her apart. Their first conversation was brief. A shared task led to a few exchanged words. Ethan asked her name. She answered softly and returned to her work. It could have ended there, but it did not. Days passed, and their paths continued to cross. A greeting turned into a question. A question turned into a conversation. Ethan found himself looking for her without meaning to. Lily, though careful, began to smile more often when he was near. There was a place at the far edge of the land where an old oak tree stood alone. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade and quiet away from the noise of the farm. It became their place. They met there in the evenings, after the work was done. At first they spoke of small things: the weather, the animals, the rhythm of daily life. Over time, their words grew deeper. Lily spoke of her mother, who had been ill for years. Ethan spoke of the pressure he felt under his father's expectations. Under that tree, the world seemed softer. For a little while, they could forget who they were supposed to be. What began as friendship slowly changed into something stronger. There was no moment where it suddenly appeared. It grew in silence, in shared glances, in the comfort they found in each other's presence. One evening, as the light began to fade, Ethan reached for her hand. Lily hesitated, her eyes searching his face, as if asking a question she could not say out loud. When she did not pull away, he held on gently. "I do not want to hide this," he said quietly. Lily lowered her gaze. "We may not have a choice." Deep down, they both knew she was right. Their meetings became more careful, their voices more hushed. They avoided the main paths and kept their distance when others were near. Yet even with all their caution, something so real could not remain unseen forever. It happened on a late afternoon. The air was still, and the workers had begun to leave the fields. Ethan and Lily stood beneath the oak tree, unaware that they were no longer alone. From a distance, Harland watched. He did not call out. He did not step forward. He simply stood there, his expression hardening as the truth settled in his mind. The next morning, the farm felt different. Ethan was called into the house before the day had fully begun. Harland stood near the window, his back turned. "You will not see that girl again," he said. Ethan felt the words like a sudden weight. "Why?" Harland turned slowly, his face set with quiet anger. "Because I have decided." Ethan held his ground. "That is not enough." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Harland spoke again, his voice colder than before. "You will do as you are told." Ethan did not answer. But something in his silence made it clear that this was not over. Outside, the fields carried on as they always had. But beneath the surface, something had begun to shift. The days that followed felt heavier than before. The farm still moved with the same rhythm, but something unseen pressed down on everything. Conversations were shorter. Laughter was rare. Even the wind that moved through the fields seemed to carry a quiet warning. Ethan tried to obey at first. He kept his distance from the far end of the land. He buried himself in work, rising earlier and staying out longer. Every task his father gave him, he completed without complaint. But no matter how much he tried, his thoughts always returned to the same place. To the oak tree. To Lily. For Lily, the change was even sharper. The moment Harlan's disapproval became known, the village turned cold. People who once greeted her now avoided her. Some whispered as she passed. Others spoke openly, their words cutting deeper than they realized. "She should have known her place," one woman said near the well. "She was reaching too high," another replied. Lily kept her head down and said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often safer than speaking. Still, the weight of it all followed her everywhere. Even the small jobs she depended on began to slip away. Doors that once opened now remained closed. One evening, as the sky dimmed into soft shades of gray, Ethan made a choice. He went to the oak tree. For a long moment he stood alone, unsure if she would come. Then, quietly, she appeared from the far path. Her steps were careful, her eyes filled with worry. "You should not be here," she said softly. "Neither should you," Ethan replied. "But we are." They stood facing each other, the distance between them filled with everything they could not say. "This has to stop," Lily said after a pause. "Your father will not change his mind. And I cannot fight the whole village." Ethan shook his head. "I am not asking you to fight them. I am asking you to stay with me." Her expression faltered. "You do not understand what this is doing. To you. To me." "I understand enough," he said. "I know what I feel. And I know I will not let someone else decide my life for me." Lily looked away, her hands tightening at her sides. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else. Something that made her stay, even when every reason told her to leave. From a distance, someone watched. Thomas stood near the edge of the field, half hidden behind a line of trees. He had seen them meet more than once now. Unlike the others, he did not judge. He simply observed, his quiet gaze taking in every detail. He had worked on the farm for many years, long enough to understand that what was seen on the surface was not always the truth beneath. Back at the farmhouse, Harlan had grown more restless. He began keeping a closer watch on Ethan, calling for him at unexpected times, assigning tasks that left little room for anything else. It was not just control. It was fear. One night, long after the others had gone to sleep, voices echoed faintly from inside the house. Thomas, passing by on his way to the barn, slowed his steps. "You cannot keep this hidden forever," an older voice said. "I have no choice," Harlan replied, his tone low but firm. "If this continues, everything will fall apart." "Then tell him the truth." A long silence followed. "No," Harlan said at last. "That would destroy him." Thomas stood still, his breath quiet, his mind turning. What truth could be so dangerous that it had to remain buried? From that moment on, he paid closer attention. To Harlan, to Ethan, and to Lily. Something was wrong. And whatever it was, it had already begun to change everything. The storm arrived without warning. Dark clouds gathered over the fields, swallowing the last light of day. The wind picked up, bending the crops in restless waves. Within moments, rain began to fall, heavy and unrelenting, turning the dry paths into mud. Ethan could not ignore the feeling that something was wrong. He had not seen Lily all day. She had not come to the farm, and no one in the village had mentioned her. A quiet unease settled in his chest, growing stronger with each passing hour. As the rain poured down, he made his decision. He ran. The path to Lily's cottage was rough and narrow, made worse by the storm. His boots slipped more than once, but he did not stop. By the time he reached the small house at the edge of the village, he was soaked and breathless. The door stood slightly open. A cold sense of fear rushed through him. "Lily," he called out, stepping inside. The room was dim, lit only by the faint light that slipped through the window. Her mother lay on the bed, weak and unmoving, her breathing shallow. Ethan moved closer, his voice softer now. "Where is she?" The woman tried to speak, but her words were broken, barely a whisper. Ethan caught only a few fragments. "Gone, help, not safe," his heart pounded. He stepped back, his thoughts racing. Where could Lily have gone in this weather? And why would she leave her mother alone? At the same time, back on the farm, Thomas had taken shelter in one of the old storage barns. The storm rattled the wooden walls, filling the space with a low, constant noise. He had come there to secure tools and close the doors, but something else caught his attention. A loose board near the back wall. It shifted slightly when the wind pushed against it. Thomas paused, then reached out and pulled it aside. Behind it was a small hidden space. Inside, he found a wooden box, worn with age. It did not belong with the rest of the tools and equipment. There was something deliberate about the way it had been hidden. Thomas hesitated for only a moment before opening it. Inside were old papers, tied together with a faded piece of cloth. Beneath them lay a photograph. He picked it up and studied it closely. A young woman stood in the image, her face soft, her expression calm. Beside her was a man Thomas recognized immediately, though much younger than he had ever seen him. Harland. Thomas's grip tightened. He set the photograph aside and unfolded the letters. The ink had faded in places, but the words were still clear enough to read. As his eyes moved across the lines, his expression slowly changed. What began as curiosity turned into disbelief, then into something heavier. The letters spoke of a past no one on the farm had ever mentioned, of promises made in secret, of a relationship that had been hidden from the world, and of a child. Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. His mind moved quickly, connecting pieces that had never seemed related before. Lily's presence, Harland's anger, the fear in his voice the night he spoke of the truth. It all led to one conclusion, one that was almost too difficult to accept. Thomas looked down at the photograph again, then back at the letters in his hands. The truth was no longer buried, and if it was real, it would change everything. The storm had begun to fade, but the air still felt heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Thomas did not wait. He left the barn with the letters and the photograph held tightly in his hands. His steps were quick, steady, driven by a sense of urgency he could not ignore. The truth he carried was too large to keep hidden any longer. He found Ethan near the edge of the fields, searching in the fading light, his clothes still damp from the rain. "Ethan," Thomas called out. Ethan turned, his face tense. "Have you seen her?" Thomas shook his head. "Not yet. But there is something you need to understand first." Ethan stepped closer, frustration rising. "This is not the time for that." "It is the only time," Thomas replied, his voice firm in a way Ethan had never heard before. He held out the photograph. Ethan took it without thinking. At first, he only glanced at it, confused. Then he looked again, more carefully. His expression shifted. "I have seen her before," he said slowly. "That is Lily's mother." Thomas nodded. "Look beside her." Ethan's eyes moved to the man standing next to the woman. Recognition came quickly, followed by disbelief. "No," he said under his breath. "Read the letters," Thomas said, placing them in his hands. Ethan hesitated, then unfolded the papers. The sound of the pages moving in the quiet air seemed louder than it should have been. His eyes scanned the words, and with each line, the color drained from his face. "This cannot be true," he whispered. A voice answered from behind him. "It is." They both turned. Harland stood a few steps away, his figure still, his face unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan looked at him, his hands trembling slightly. "Tell me this is not real." Harland said nothing. That silence was enough. Ethan stepped back, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "You knew," he said, his voice unsteady. "You knew all along." "I was trying to stop this," Harland replied quietly. "Stop it." Ethan's voice rose. "You let it happen." You let us believe. He could not finish the sentence. The weight of the truth settled between them. At that moment, soft footsteps approached. Lily stood at the edge of the field, her eyes moving from one face to another. She sensed something was wrong before a single word was spoken. "What is going on?" she asked. Ethan could not answer. Thomas looked at her, then at the letters still in Ethan's hands. There was no easy way to say it. But there was no way to hide it anymore. So he spoke. And as the truth reached her, the world she knew began to fall apart. Silence settled over the farm in the days that followed. The truth had spread quietly, but its weight could be felt everywhere. No one spoke of it openly, yet it changed the way people looked at one another. The fields were the same, the work continued, but something within the land itself felt different. Ethan kept to himself. He moved through his tasks without complaint, but his energy was gone. The place that once brought him peace now felt empty. Every corner of the farm carried a memory he could not escape. Lily did not return. She stayed at her cottage, caring for her mother, avoiding the village as much as she could. The pain was too fresh, too deep to face anyone. What she had lost could not be replaced, and what she had learned could not be undone. Harlan tried, in his own way, to repair what he had broken. He sent word to Lily, offering support, promising to take responsibility at last. He spoke of providing for her and her mother, of giving them a place on the farm where they would no longer struggle. But his words came too late. Some things could not be fixed with regret. Thomas watched it all from a distance. He returned to his quiet routine, saying little, but his presence remained steady. He had done what he believed was right, even if it brought pain to those around him. A few mornings later, Lily made her choice. She would leave the village. With her mother by her side, she prepared to go somewhere new, far from the past that had followed her for too long. Before she left, she went one last time to the oak tree. Ethan was already there. They stood in silence, the space between them filled with everything that had changed. "We did not know," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "But now we do." There was nothing more to say. No promises. No hope for what once was. Only a quiet goodbye. As she walked away, Ethan remained beneath the tree, watching until she disappeared from view. And for the first time, he understood that some truths do not just change lives. They divide them forever. As the sun sets over the silent farm, one truth remains. Some secrets may stay hidden for years, but when they finally come to light, they don't just change lives, they change everything. Ethan lost the love he thought would be his future. Lily lost the life she once knew. And Harlan must now live with the weight of choices he can never undo. But what about you? What would you have done in their place? Would you reveal the truth, or protect the ones you love, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video. And subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. Share this story with someone who believes that truth always finds a way. Until next time, remember, not every story has a happy ending, but every story has a lesson worth hearing.